Have you been approached by Intel about investing? You're watching the Techstrong Gang. My, how the mighty have fallen. Intel going door to door, hat in hand. Well, not quite. But we've got a lot to talk about besides Intel as well today. We've got a great gang to talk about it with. Let me introduce you to them. We have Guy Courier from Futurum VI. We have Kate Scarcella, Mitch Ashley, and sporting his Yankees shirt after their opening playoff game, Mike Vizard. Hey, gang, how are you today?
Pretty good.
Good. So, Mike, I started it off. Intel is out raising funds. Why?
Yeah,
With the money from the government? Well, the government really didn't give them more money than they were giving them. But the NVIDIA money and everything, was it not enough?
I guess it's not enough because I think I heard somewhere in the tune of they need like $40 billion, which is quite a large sum of money. And I'm not quite clear whether Apple's going to cough this up or not, since there are just reports. But Kate, I'd love to get your opinion on this. And also, from your perspective, is there anybody who's off the list of possible sources of revenue for Intel? I mean, would they not go to Qualcomm, or would they not go to Broadcom? Or do you think that all these companies are going to get a piece of Intel at the end of the day?
That's a great point, Mike. I think at the end of the day, actually, I think everybody is all in. I think what strikes me is less about the money and more about the symbolism. Intel just doesn't need cash. They need the weight of the name, like Apple. So, from Apple's side, it's not just about the technology, because their chips are, world class. But the incentive is supply chain, especially in this new political market that we're all playing in. So they have to start thinking about supply chain resilience, and since their chips are this over reliance on Taiwan. So but I do see this from the Intel side as a very desperate move. Personally, the Apple involvement, and I think everybody really will be all in. Like, this is more of it would be more symbolic from an Apple standpoint. But Apple and their lens, I mean, they have always had a thing on speed, right? So it's one of the reasons why they went to their own chip making, and, but at the end of the day, I think it shows that Apple is willing to play more from the stakes game of, hey, we're going to do something in the US. But at the end of the day, I don't think it will. And I don't think it's going to help Intel either. I mean, sometimes I think it's just more important if a company's making it or not making it. If it's not making it, just put it out, let it die. So positive this morning.
No, Kate, I appreciate the sentiment. But, look, Mitch knows this. I spent 20 years as a biz dev, corp dev kind of guy. And that's really my love when I'm working in that kind of, bigger company. This is what we call in the business a strategic investment. It's not about how much money it was, even if it was $1. It's about a strategic investment, because what Intel is really looking to do, you know what, Mike? Qualcomm, all the other ones you mentioned, they're all candidates, because what we want here is Intel wants to be the American Foundry. Maybe that's what they should spin off the Foundry business and call it Foundry America or American Foundry. All of these companies in this, not going to get drawn into it, but in the present state of government that we're in, all of these companies are looking to have domestic, sovereign sources of their chips so that they don't have to rely on foreign countries that may be susceptible to tariffs and blackmail and everything else. So it makes sense for Apple to say, you know what, maybe Apple still designs their chips. It'll be an Apple designed chip designed in California, but made in the US. Qualcomm is the same thing. Broadcom, quite frankly, has shown near zero interest in making chips here in the US. I don't know if they're going to get a Christmas card from Donnie this year. But, so I don't know if Broadcom will do it, but everyone else will. And so that's what I think you're looking at. Intel becomes America's foundry. It's partially owned by the government anyway. And anyone who wants chips and doesn't want to face the uncertainty of dealing with a chaotic administration it's a wise investment.
And I think there's many ways to look at this, and I'm not sure which one is if there's a right one or it's just there are multiple. One is, yes, it's strategically lining up Intel to make sure their supply chain, they've got an American manufacturer as that starts to develop. They don't want to be cut out of that and find themselves, now what do we do if suddenly Intel's filled up with orders from everybody else that invested in them? The other is, there's a term I came to know called embedded financing. And I learned this in the 90s when Lucent invested in one of the high flyer startups that we had. And essentially it's investing in companies so they buy your products, or investing in companies to get favorable terms, like what Microsoft and OpenAI have done, in some of those kind of investments. So it isn't strictly just an investment to get a return ROI on the stock or something like that. You're getting favorable terms for future business in some form or way.
It's strategic.
It is. And, you don't know what part of that might be the discussions that they're having, or some of it's explicit, some's not. But I suspect that's a big part of this as well, because, you want to secure the supply chain, but you want to make sure you're at the front of the line for what you want to get from Intel, and you've got it on favorable terms.
So how far will this go before it kind of spins out of control and somebody in Europe says, you know what? We got to have Macs that are based on Intel processors that are made here in Europe. And then we'll all be arguing about which type of Mac did you get? Did you get the one made in France, or did you get the one made in the US? But I heard the one in the US maybe not as good as the one in France.
But this is the whole sovereign IT in a nutshell. You're just taking it strictly to chips. How long is it until they say in Europe, I need a cloud provider that's not a US-based company because Uncle Sam has a really long arm for US-based companies?
When is the AWS European sovereign cloud not good enough, right?
If you hold that thought to the C block,
that's right, to block C.
That's the sovereign issue. It's the entire supply chain. It's your hardware, it's your software, it's your bandwidth, it's the balkanization of the internet.
I'm a little confused. If maybe there's something I've missed. It sounds like Mitch, at least Mitch and Alan, I don't know, you're thinking that this is a chip manufacturing play of some kind for Apple, get a new supplier from Intel. Is that right? Not design, but fab, or both?
Right. And to augment their whatever cash they dropped off in Mar-a-Lago already, to make sure that the United States doesn't decide to get in the way. They don't
drop off cash. They give him 24-karat gold trophies or something.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Kate, I didn't mean to jump on something you had to say, but I think it's highly unlikely that Apple's expecting anything from an Intel Foundry fab anytime soon. Certainly not for a mere, what is it, $1 billion, $2 billion, whatever. I think it's $1 billion, right? A mere $1 billion or $2 billion. Foundry is deleveraging out of mainland China, I think. I don't think they manufacture there anymore. And they in the Pat Gelsinger days, Intel got a significant from the Build Back Better or whatever came after it. I don't remember, the Infrastructure Act. They got significant money to start building fabs here in the U.S., but their processes are way behind. And the one that would halfway get them there, called 14A, they don't even want to implement. So there's no way for M5 or M6 or M whatever that Apple has to be manufactured by Intel under that sort of a contract.
No,
And so,
Guy,
yeah.
I got to disagree. I think what you've got NVIDIA and all these people and what the Trump administration is pushing is that Intel is going to be able to manufacture cutting-edge chips in their foundry for the Qualcomms and the Apples and the Broadcoms of the world. If Intel's not, then this whole thing is just, you might as well just pour gasoline on the money and burn it.
I think you've got a good point though, Guy, which is, you don't take your Ford Mustang in the garage and go run an F1 race with it, right? You've got to build up to get to that level of producing something as elite as a 2 nanometer, 4 nanometer kind of chip. My guess is I don't think an Apple, whoever's looking at Intel to be the M1, M5 or M6 replacement manufacturer. I mean, Intel does a lot of other chips, right? There's a lot of other chips that go into computers and mobile devices and cell phones and iPads and all that kind of thing. So it may be just as much other kinds of chips that don't require the highest sophistication.
No, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Is that where you were going?
And in fact, that would not be Apple's design. That would be, using, having if anything, a Qualcomm competitor to turn to for networking, because Intel's been manufacturing.
I'll give you, for
chips
example, I believe the new iPhone has Apple silicon for the Wi-Fi.
For the Wi-Fi, yeah. There's specific ones they're designing now, and maybe Intel's not ready to do that yet.
I would just put a point on what Guy is trying to say here is that, so if they actually did something meaningful for a core system, it would be 2031, 2032 by the time I actually saw that roll off a manufacturing line somewhere and into a store.
At least.
And then if I add that on top of that, well, who knows who's going to be president in 2032? So maybe I'm just putting this out there now as like, a little drop of cash just to buy some peace of mind.
Well, that's pretty smart to use opium, other people's money.
I have a theory, but I'd like Kate to. Sorry, Alan, you're running the show. Go.
No, you go. Let's hear your theory.
Well, I think that this is part of this entire current quasi-oligarchic interlocking directorate type culture that we are in right now, led by the current U.S. administration. I'm also not going to go there, Alan, but it sure seems a whole lot like, a bill drops out of Tim Cook's, $1 billion drops out of Tim Cook's pocket when, he bends over to pick up $100 bill. So it's largely symbolic. I think Kate's right. And that's my theory, is that this is just a way of saying, hey, we're playing ball also. When next time I visit, I'll bring you another gold statuette. For now, it's $1 billion to this company that you co-own.
And I agree with you, Guy. I think it's like smoke and mirrors. I don't think it's real. I think it's meaning, they have their blueprint and their designs on what they're going to do, to change that up. It's not going to be like, okay, yeah, we'll go do this. And,
Yeah.
So. Well,
we're about out of time for this segment, but I'm going to end. I'm going to take the last word because Guy says I run it. If Intel can't manufacture state-of-the-art chips, get the hell out of the business. That's it.
It can't. Sorry, you have the last word. It can't. It will not be able. I'm not going to say never. That is a huge hill for Intel to climb at this point. It's really difficult. And the investment we've seen so far, not going to do it. SoftBank's interest, not going to do it. This is a serious problem, especially since there's really only one good supplier in the world of the kind of manufacturing equipment you need. So,
okay. I enjoyed that George Bush Sr. imitation you were doing there. That was great. Now I got to do it.
1,000 points of light.
Read my lips. Okay. Hey, we're going to take a break.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back, and our friends at the Futurum Group have a report out this week talking about, well, who is top of the heap for software development platforms. And it's as far as I know, I'm going to let Mitch explain the details, but it's based on a 100-point system. And at the top of the heap right now are Microsoft, AWS, and Google. But Mitch, walk us through. This is the first of these reports. What went into it, and what are you guys trying to do here?
Yeah, it's actually one that I helped guide the development of. Is actually created by AI. I didn't write the report, but I did create the kind of classification, the analysis system of how it evaluated the vendors. And the purpose of software development platforms is really kind of rethink it more holistically for the full software development lifecycle. I didn't want to call it that because that has its own connotation. So, but vendors have strengths, right? And they have strengths in different parts of the software development lifecycle. And that's what this report reflects, is who's best positioned or being positioned to be a platform provider for software development throughout the whole process. Now, of course, no one company is there fully, but there are a lot of things that go into the analysis of this. Again, it's driven by AI. It's looking at publicly available information. It's looking at data sets that we have, that we've provided, that we purchased, user reviews from G2. It's our own, my analysis and other analysts' analysis are input into that. And then it comes out with a report, and it's looking not just where they were 6 months ago and what the data looks like between now and then. It's looking at the next 12 to 18 months of what is their strategy, what have they done so far, what are they doing to position them to execute on that strategy, and how does that kind of rate? If you're thinking about investing in a technology, it's not just what you're buying today, what are you buying into for tomorrow? That's really the intent of the Signal report. So behind the scene, the reason for it is, Alan and I and probably others here have gone through let me spend months filling out your spreadsheets of data that I have to give the analyst to go write a report for. By the time it comes out, it's 6 months old, if not older. And it's all backward looking, reflecting. And this is an attempt for us to really disrupt the analyst industry and do something different and lean into AI. So maybe this is a vibe report. I'm not sure if we call it that yet or not, but that's the idea.
So I feel like I need to do some foundational work here. So we've covered the Futurum Signal reports from their first launch. I think it was maybe a month ago, maybe a little less. Since then, there's been, I think, 3 different Signal reports on 3 areas, this, Mitch, being the third, and it happens to be in your area. And, the Signal reports are written by AI, and they do give you a kind of a unique view. It's not a wave, it's not quadrants, it's not all that, but there's a radar, and there's individual company coverages. And if you go back and look on the Techstrong sites, I think specifically Techstrong IT at least, you can actually see examples of a full Signal report, I think on the data intelligence or something space market. This new one, as I said, Mitchell did. And Mitch, I know how much work you put into it and everything else. But part of me just wants to say, wait a second. You spent all this time, did all this work to tell me Microsoft, AWS, and Google sit atop the software development platform? I didn't need to fill out all the spreadsheets for that either, right?
But the problem is they did.
I would disagree with that assessment. I think Microsoft up there doesn't surprise much people, but the fact that Google and AWS ranked as high as they did suggests that, they're gaining some ground here over the years, when Microsoft has always been the house that developers built. So I looked at that a little bit differently than just saying, AWS and Google by default would be up there.
No, you're looking at it wrong. Where's stuff getting done today? In the cloud. And if it's getting done in the cloud, AWS dwarfs Microsoft's cloud presence. So
let me take a different view of it, Alan. I always thought of AWS, kind of starting my cloud journey in AWS, as the infrastructure, the iPaaS, right? or I ask. And it's not that same company anymore, right? It's
Nope.
very much a development platform, services. You could say the same thing for Google.
Yep.
You could say the same thing for Oracle, where they're headed.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you,
IBM.
Mitch. Where is
Exactly.
Oracle in this?
Oracle, the elite are the top three, the three that we mentioned. Oracle and IBM are in the next tier, the leaders tier. And to be honest with you, they're pretty highly rated in those as well. So it isn't like, miles of difference between the first three and everybody else. It is a very competitive race. And you can argue whether folks can catch up to Microsoft. That's a huge task, right? But I think to your point, Mike, the other two hypervisors have gained ground. I mean, we didn't think of AWS as a development platform. Maybe developers liked it, but now we have a lot of things. They're coming out with their own IDE. They've invested heavily, not necessarily in models, but in things like Bedrock and Bedrock Agent to help you create a software and also build application softwares. But you have to also look at the second tier and the third and the fourth. One, I think it's significant to even be in this report, not because it's a Futurum report, but because of the fact that it's looking at all parts of the development lifecycle and analyzing where are the strengths that this vendor plays. It may be more ops heavy, maybe more development heavy, maybe more infrastructure heavy. But the fact that they play in more than that one area and they do have some strengths in those, that's why you see, a GitLab and a GitHub and others that are in the report. It's pretty interesting. The other is when you read it, it's not telling you what you already know. Yes, I know I wouldn't have expected somebody else. That makes sense. It's AWS and Microsoft, though. And Google. It wasn't predetermined. But why? Okay, so what? Now why? What are they going to be doing over the next year and a half? And what will continue or lead to their success? And for everybody else that's in the report. That's what's different about this. So that's why you should care.
Mm-hmm. So I would ask you about this, though. There's two things in the report that struck me a little bit so GitHub is rated separately from Microsoft and Red Hat is rated separately from IBM. But are those two together with, a more representative of what that platform really is these days, or are they still separate platforms in your mind?
It's a really good question. And that was something we debated and I thought a lot about because you could say, well, what about HashiCorp? Should have been listed there separately? And I think it's a reflection of how much are those companies integrated into the core parent company, or are they still have they been operating more in an independent fashion? One indication is to the report financials on them separately, or are they all rolled into the company financials? It's not the only determination. IBM's clearly making headway in putting effort into integrating HashiCorp into IBM's offering and becoming really strong in the operations and infrastructure with software. Same thing I think will happen with Red Hat. That's starting to change over time, how fast it will happen. You can also look at GitHub. Up to this point, it's been pretty independent from Microsoft. And until Microsoft Build this year, there were a few announcements. And yes, GitHub kind of crosses over with Microsoft Copilot and the VS Code capabilities, but they aren't largely integrated. I think that's going to change too over time. But today, they're from the market standpoint, yes, they're owned by them, but the people that work with them largely see them as independent companies or standalone entities as part of a larger company.
I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
What about NVIDIA? What about OpenAI?
Good questions. There is a section of the report we call the folks that are in the top, included in the main analysis, are the spotlight. But there's a whole list of vendors who we also identified as these are potential players, or maybe they're close to, or even at that point that we could include them in a next report. You could ask that of very much easily of Anthropic, of OpenAI. You could also ask it about, AnySphere for Cursor, and for Windsurf. These things are starting to evolve in more than just a development tool, doing more and more engagement with the infrastructure and automation. Someday, maybe they're playing in this field. We'll see. I could definitely see, depending on where NVIDIA takes their software stack, that's a huge advantage for them in the age of agents and AI. That could be the next software development platform beyond traditional software.
I agree. Mitch, I know the first Signal report they made read like the whole thing available. I'm not sure if this whole one's available, but certainly the exec summary, the whole Signal is available.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The full Signal is available. There's an executive summary, just a quick, here's the kind of charts and things that came out. But the full report is available to everybody. There's also a nice heat map that shows kind of the areas that we evaluated, the 5 different categories that AI looked at. Where they were the strongest? Where did they not play as much in strength? So maybe you performed super well in the financial area. Product innovation might have been kind of more medium and wasn't quite as high performing. One thing to note is you mentioned the underpoint grading system. Microsoft was the only company that was in the 90s on all 5 categories. AWS and Google didn't receive a 90 score or above in all 5, though they had a lot of 90 scores, of course, to appear in that elite category.
That heat map is one of the more interesting ways to read these Signal reports, and I want to commend my colleague Mitch on leading and driving the production of this report and writing a lot of it. But at the same time, remember that the data sources here in the analysis have a lot to do with user judgments, user judgments of the platforms, aggregated, market information, all crunched together, so that what I think we're producing in future and with these Signal reports is a good sense of the market and the user and the practitioner's take on these categories, as much as the analyst, in this case Mitch's, expert judgment and experience. And looking at those 5 factors, the factors are business value, overall ecosystem, go-to-market, which is an interesting judgment point. How well are they enabling users to understand, buy what they need, use what they need well? And then, of course, the usual, product capabilities and the overall vision. Did I get those right, Mitch?
You nailed it, man.
Yeah.
Good spokesperson.
So one of the more interesting things that you can do with a Signal report, if you're want to see how the companies stack up, is to just look at the factors that are most interesting to you. I thought it was really significant that AWS doesn't score in the 90s, doesn't score top tier on their product vision, their roadmap, like that sort of thing, while Google and Microsoft did. And also the fact that that's the heat map that Mitch was referring to. Very few of the vendors scored super high outside of those top 3 in many areas. So you can look, for example, at a GitHub or a Red Hat, and see that they are strong in areas that are important to you, or maybe not so strong in areas that are important to you. So it's not a one-dimensional, here's number 1, here's number 2, here's number whatever. In fact, no one but the big 3 scored well for ecosystem, or scored in the top tier for ecosystem, which is a big part of that's how Amazon sort of led everybody into this model of buying into a quote-unquote platform overall and taking advantage of lots of different capabilities around the market, not just from those companies alone.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. I think you did a very, very intelligent analysis of kind of what this is about and some good insights about how to use it. I also want to call out sort of the folks that are in the aspiring, the bottom tier, if you want to think of it that way. First of all, I think it's important just to be in this report because it's a recognition that you're not sort of focused in one area, and that's where your strengths are. And a good example is SUSE. BMC is another. They're both in transition. They've got new management teams, at least within the last couple of years, relatively new. BMC software split up into 2 companies. They're under change. They're experiencing some change. But 2 years ago, you wouldn't necessarily say SUSE probably wouldn't have been into this report because they didn't have observability. They didn't have blueprints for developers. They didn't have curated images for the development process for better software security. So these companies are making strides in expanding to bigger parts of what maybe their core strengths initially were. And the fact that they're in the aspiring isn't mean that they're bad. It means that this is a big growth area for them. And they of course need to execute to continue to deliver that. But it actually shows you that analysis and why.
So I have a question. Can if I'm an IT leader, can I download the report and then change the weights to suit what I think are the more important attributes and play with it a little bit to customize it for my own particular biases?
Today, you can download the report. Where this will end up, I would say, in the relatively near future. I don't know the date, but this will be not only available within the Future of Intelligence platform, but you'll be able to do some slicing and dicing and some analysis based on the data, which I think would be super helpful. Like, let me dig more into ecosystem and, what do we mean by for developers? Because that's one of the things that was different about this report than the first two is it put greater emphasis on not just ISVs and vendors and resellers. It also put a big emphasis on what about the developer and the community and the user groups that are all part of this ecosystem, because that's where somebody like an AWS and a Microsoft and GitHub, for that matter, really stand out. Those are things that are hard to build and take a lot of years and momentum for other vendors to catch up on.
Can I enhance your answer a little bit, Mitch?
Please.
Mike, there's nothing inherent in the tool, and the slicing and dicing you can't, there's nothing inherent in the report itself, and the slicing and dicing you can't do yet. But the components of each score by each of those 5 factors are right there in a table that you can probably copy paste, or at worst spend a little time copying over. And so then, a little math, and you can definitely use your own weighting or even eliminate one of them if you choose to come up with your own scoring system.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. Because open weighting is going to be a thing, man. It's being an issue.
All right. Hey, let's take a break. We're running a little over. We'll come back for C-Block, Cloud Control. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, folks, we're back, and we're going to have a little chat about, we talked about it briefly earlier, but there's this whole notion of cloud sovereignty, which I guess used to be just I want to put stuff in my data center and control it. There's a story up on the Techstrong AI this week, or Techstrong IT actually, talking about how SAP and OpenAI and folks are building out their own sovereign cloud for the German public sector market. And it seems like this is going to be a generic trend across the board. But to Alan's point earlier, Guy, are we just looking at the balkanization of IT, and everybody's going to be behind their own borders and their own things? And this whole notion of these, clouds that were highly distributed and were highly extensible, who cares?
So oddly enough, I don't think that's where we're headed. I think that this is a nice corrective. I mean, I don't know if you were with me on this, Mike, when we were working way back when together, but it seemed that part of the message behind the clouds and the growth of cloud computing and all that sort of stuff was, hey, everybody gets to share everything everywhere all the time. Yay. It wasn't all that long ago when I think Google Drive changed its default share. When you click on a file to share, it changed its default from share with everybody in the world who has the link to, share with specific people. Just to give an example, that was something that always annoyed me, was that I had to manually go in every single time I shared a file. Well, anyway, we don't need to go into that. The point here is definitely sovereign clouds, which were defined easily 10 years ago. but have been proved very difficult to implement, are now becoming a thing. Certainly Oracle has been, just by the nature of the Oracle business, has been building sovereign clouds around the world. They might have 14 of them by now or something, just to deliver specific applications, because that's the heart and soul of Oracle's business. So it's not even really a surprise that SAP in particular is jumping into this, it being a main Oracle competitor. The other thing, though, is Germany. They established some kind of nationalization, so to speak, or sovereign services and sovereign data coalition and fund, and it's like sort of a whole combination of things. There's hundreds of billions of euros behind it. SAP is obviously a core participant in this. But then the last thing I will say is the way this particular sovereign cloud is being implemented is on the Delos cloud, the SAP Delos cloud, which more or less is a managed Microsoft Azure cloud. And Microsoft, and I'm trying so hard to segue to you, Alan. Microsoft is an American company. So does it matter if your data center's air-gapped and 3 of the clusters inside are air-gapped and there are German troops standing all around it and all that other sort of stuff? That data inside is running on Microsoft Azure under Microsoft Azure licensing, even if it's being managed by SAP. And so there's a real question right now as to how international law works for this sort of thing, because in some ways it feels like the US's posture by law is that that is data that can be extradited and brought back to the United States on command, because it is an American company that is running at least the base of that stack.
So, and I did write this article on there about the long arm. The head of Microsoft France testified to the French legislature that international law be damned. As a U.S. company, they are obligated to obey the orders of the U.S. government, and that anything on their infrastructure anywhere in the world is subject to U.S. jurisdiction and to bring, back in U.S. jurisdiction. But this sovereign issue has outgrown sovereign clouds. Cloud's only one part of it. It is sovereign IT. Where are your chips made? Are there back doors in chips? Where is your network infrastructure made? Where is it housed? How is it powered? Right? These are all things where everybody, all of a sudden, the nationalistic walls are coming up, saying, I can't afford to rely on Canadian electricity. I need American electricity for my American data center. And
what
Mexico
are you talking about? I need a New York data center. I can't trust Indiana. What are you kidding me?
I don't blame you. Who knows what goes on in Indiana?
Hey, I got your data center right here.
Yeah, exactly. I give you a data center. But and so this is the balkanization. It doesn't stop at that cloud data center. It goes up and down the hardware and software stack. How long? Now, I've spoken to SUSE on this. SUSE is building data centers in Germany with SUSE Cloud, right? There are no American companies or American software in there, so that it cannot be subject to, as Microsoft said, the long arm of Uncle Sam. Unfortunately, this is where we're going. And let me just say that, China comes out here saying, oh, this is so wrong. We want to bring it to the world. Those are crocodile tears. They're crocodile tears. They're doing the same thing. They're pretty good at building walls in China. They've been doing it for thousands of years, but they didn't learn their lesson. Because when we build walls like this, we all lose. We all lose. The internet is one internet for the world. It works best when we all partake in it. When we put up walls, we all lose.
And this is the retraction of globalization, right? That's what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Is the pendulum is now swinging back the other way. How hard and how fast, how far it goes, we'll see. I did a report on this about a month ago. So looking at, actually, you mentioned SUSE, also Red Hat, their strategies around how to address sort of a European approach or a international approach to sovereignty. And the differences were pretty interesting. Red Hat took we're open source, so we're just naturally, neutral. Now that doesn't address the long arm of the U.S. government issue. SUSE, on the other hand, quickly was one of the first companies to announce we also are offering a support model that only involves European employees. No other countries are involved in delivering this service from a support standpoint. So you mentioned it's more than the cloud. It is. Go to a site called euro-stack.com. There is a letter, there's an organization that's part of the EU designed around creating a completely EU, or as much as possible, evolving over time, stack. And this is everything from collaboration software to API gateways to networking, you name it. And SUSE is one of the kind of named players there as an early adopter on that. But there's other companies like Airbus, companies that are based in Europe. And much like we were talking about earlier, is the Apple investment in Intel a supply chain move, or what is it? That's essentially what we're seeing here, is another form of that, protecting my own interests if the world goes to hell and I lose control of.
Well, no, but if you're the EU, here's the EU stuck between the proverbial rock and a hard place. You got the US on this side saying if it somehow breathes my air, it's mine. And you got China on this side, who, the poster child for freedom and information.
And not to mention backdoors, which they're really good at.
So what is the EU to do? What's the EU to do? And let's not just say the EU. I think you're going to start seeing like the tigers in Asia, the Singapores and the
Saudi
Indonesias,
Arabia.
Right. Yeah. So, Kate, let me ask you a question. Kate, as you look at all of this, are we in danger of devolving into what amount to a series of city-states where all these different little localities will have their own IT policies and nationalistic tendencies, and Milan will tell Rome that, we're going to do this and we don't care what you said to the EU, or vice versa. It could be, somebody sitting in one part of France is likely to tell Paris to take a walk. I mean, how crazy can this get?
I think once we start to go down this road, I really, you made the joke about, Indiana, and I don't think it's far off. I think localized cloud is coming, whether we like it or not, but it's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt us from the global scale. It's going to hurt the portability issue, innovation, interoperability is something that we have worked decades on. And I think we are close to shutting that down. And it's really unfortunate.
It is. Look, you know what, Mitchell, you said the death of globalization, or at least the beginning of the end of globalization. Let us not forget that since the end of World War II, about 75 years ago, a little more, 80 years ago, we have seen the greatest expansion of human well-being, humanity's well-being, lifting people out of poverty, raising the average age, right, life expectancy, raising our pace of innovation. Guys, you're willing to throw that all away?
Yeah. The democratization that technology has brought has been so important, and it's crushing to see what's happening.
I mean, and take history as a guide. I said it jokingly before. China was a very advanced society 1,000 years ago. 1,200 years ago. They built this wall to keep the barbarians out, and instead they locked themselves in. That's not the way. It's not the way. I'm sorry. It's just not the way. It's not. I don't think it's good for humanity. I don't think it's good for technology.
I hate to bring in a Dungeons and Dragons reference, but
Why not?
when the U.S. kind of evolves or moves from let's say a neutral good to a chaotic neutral, maybe chaotic evil, and depending on where you sit, that unsettles things. I mean, that's how we hear all about in the U.S. about how Europeans view us now and view our government or our president or our folks at the Ryder Cup misbehaving. It has an effect, and people have to respond to that, saying, well, I can't depend on other folks to have my self-interest or enough of my self-interest to be able to do what we need to do as a nation or nation state. How do we take more control over that? I think there's real danger around open source. Open source could fall apart, right? Just think about
absolutely.
that.
You're seeing the balkanization of open source. But Mitch, what you're really saying is, I can't trust them to lead the world. Mm-hmm. I can't trust them to lead the new world order that they put in place 80 years ago. We need a new world order.
And that's scary in itself. And I'll just want to say one thing, and that is what really, really bothers me here, is that encryption is real. If you're trying to get control over your, local entities and things like that, why not deal with encryption? Why not deal with key control? And that plays more of a leverage, which I think, helps from a.
Can I play Tom Clancy? Because the NSA has quantum computing or something that breaks the encryption. It's QDEC.
All right.
I don't think they trust that.
I understand that.
That encryption can't be done. But, it is what it is. Anyway, we're over time, and I've got to go do a webinar. So we're going to have to call an end. Otherwise, I'd love to talk about this all day. Guy, Kate, Mitch, Mike, as always, it's great discussion. I hope you all have enjoyed it. Of course, we'll have Techstrong TV following, so stay tuned on that. And we'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, with even more Techstrong gang. For now, I'm Alan Schimmel. We're out.